Welcome everyone to QB Power Hour. Today is Thursday, March 1st, 2018. And today's episode is Managing Inventory in QuickBooks Online Part 1. Today's episode is an ACE, an Advanced Continuing Education episode. Eligible episode for 1 hour. We'll discuss that in detail. We'll spend a couple minutes talking about QB Power Hour, our sponsors, our host. We'll talk about the CPA process, and then we'll spend about 50 plus minutes talking about the main content, which is managing inventory in QuickBooks Online, and there are the learning objectives for today. QB Power Hour is a webinar series that is usually every other week or twice a month. The next episode after this one will actually take a break. It won't be exactly 2 weeks, it'll be 3 weeks. Because of tax season, right now we're at the heart of tax season. And on 3/22, March 22nd, we'll do working with QuickBooks desktop remotely and using an app called QBox. And then as you see the schedule, afterwards, we're going to go to April 5th, April 19th, May 3rd, May 17th. So far, we only have an episode scheduled for 5/17. So between April and May, we're not really 100% sure what we're going to do. The top topics will be announced. We do about 50% QuickBooks Desktop, 50% QuickBooks Online. We try to keep it even. And from time to time, we'll have a special guest, a third-party app, or industry-related topics or news. Michelle Long is not with us today. She's actually taking a rest. She had surgery recently, so we really, really wish her a speedy recovery. And we miss you, and hopefully we'll see you back on the next one. My name is Hector Garcia. I'm a CPA, an advanced QuickBooks Pro advisor as well. I live and work in the Miami, Florida area. There's my email. I'm pretty good at answering QuickBooks emails. Actually, I spend the whole day answering QuickBooks emails. It's pretty much a full-time job now. And there's my Twitter handle if you want to contact me via Twitter. We want to thank our sponsors. TSheets is the #1 rated app in apps.com. Create, manage, and approve timesheets from any device. Go to tsheets.com/pros to set up a free account for your accounting practice. Arrow Workflow is the only workflow manager created pretty much for QuickBooks Pro advisors, and it was done by a bunch of QuickBooks Pro advisors. I know them all. They're awesome people, and it's fully integrated with QuickBooks Online. Great way to track and manage your workflow, whether you're a one-man show or multiple staff practice. And of course, HubDoc, the most popular document aggregator for QuickBooks Power users, is integrated with QuickBooks Online, but a lot of QuickBooks Desktop users use it, such as myself. It allows you to download and automate the bank statement, check image, aggregation process. Does it all automatically. There's a free account for accountants, hubdoc.com/QB Power Hour. So about the CPE ACE process, if you need CPE, if you're a CPA certified bookkeeper, make sure that you're attending the webinar live. If you're watching the recording, you can't get a CPE certificate. You must be logged in for at least 50 minutes. You have to answer 3 out of the 4 polling questions that will be asked. The CPE certificates get emailed. Sometimes it takes me 4 weeks, sometimes 5 weeks. Give an average of 4 weeks. This episode is approved for ACE, so your CPE certificate will be labeled ACE as well, and you'll be able to report your advanced education credits. We have sent all the CPE certificates to date. If you feel that you didn't get one after you checked your spam folder, you can email qbpowerhour@gmail.com, and I can look into those. ACE pretty much is for advanced certified pro advisors. You must get 9 credits every 3 years. This episode is one of the ones that give you that credit. You have to go to that link below, quickbookstrainingevents.com/ACE to self-report. And it usually takes a couple of days for them to load this episode as one of the options. So after you get your certificate, you'll be able to load your hours there. Some of the upcoming events that we normally recommend, we added a new one to the list. It's called Art of Advisory. I created a Facebook Live, sort of half webinar, half video, sort of. It's actually a really new thing. We go live every Tuesday and we talk about advisory services, moving to advisory, away from compliance, more to consulting type services. It's free. It's live on Tuesdays at 12 p.m. Check it out, facebook.com/Art of Advisory. We also recommend that you go to Scaling New Heights. Michelle's going to be there, most likely. I'm going to be there. WooderEvents.com. Great conference for QuickBooks Power users. And of course, QuickBooks Connect in San Jose, California. which will be in November, QuickBooksConnect.com. Let's jump right into the topic, shall we? So let's talk about QuickBooks Online Inventory. And it's really important to use them in contrast. So I'm really going to quickly just going to compare, what's the deal with QuickBooks Online Inventory in comparison with desktop, and some of the important facts to keep in mind if you're going to implement inventory in QuickBooks Online. Number one, you must be on QuickBooks Online Plus, which is that third tier version, to have access to purchase orders and inventory. Number two, it uses FIFO inventory valuation. QuickBooks Pro, Premier, Accountant, and Enterprise Silver use average cost. So that's a big contrast, big difference in change, unless you're working with QuickBooks Enterprise Platinum, which allows you to do FIFO. But that was a big change. So that's a really important thing, is FIFO inventory valuation. If you don't know what that means, just look it up on YouTube. I have a couple of videos on that. Now, there's a new partial purchase order back ordering tracking system. So I'm going to show you that. There's a new price rules, which we covered briefly on the last episode. And I will try to cover, see if we have time, but it's new and it's all built into the item creation process, which I love it. So I'll explain that. You can actually upload pictures to the product and item list, which is something that QuickBooks Enterprise has as well, but it doesn't show up in forms. So the pictures are really not that useful, in my opinion. QBO requires a user to enter quantity on hand and a start date every time they create a new item. Pay attention to this. This is the biggest culprit of problems with inventory on my QuickBooks Online clients, because customers get confused about what they're supposed to do. They start entering some random numbers, some random start dates, and it really messes the whole thing up. This is a big change from QuickBooks Desktop, where you can create the item without having to put a quantity on hand and a start date. And this is probably the one thing that causes the most harm right from the beginning. The other big issue is that QuickBooks Online doesn't do units of measure and doesn't do inventory assembly, something that Premier and Enterprise have. So that's a really big change and big shift from features. And what I think is the biggest problem of it all, my biggest issue with QuickBooks Online Inventory, is there are no sales orders. To me, sales orders are everything for product-based companies. So there's no way to track back orders for sales, something that QuickBooks Premier and Enterprise have. Now, other issues are not as big, but they're important to note. There are no custom fields for items, so there's no way to add additional attributes to the items or show custom fields in the item level on forms. To me, is another issue, because sometimes you want to show a particular attributes of an item while you're selling them. There is no ship via drop-down menu in forms, something that QuickBooks Pro, Premier, Enterprise have. There's no box for an estimated delivery date that you can put as a data point to pull the reports, to look at the POs and see when the product's coming. And there's no estimated ship date on forms to know when you project to ship something from a sales order, or when you shipped something from an invoice in difference with the invoice date. There's also no separate item receipt bill process, which for some folks could be an issue. To me, that's not such a big deal. There's no barcodes, lot numbers, serial numbers, or multiple inventory sites, something that QuickBooks Enterprise have, and something that someone is mentioning right now. There's no value adjustment, just a quantity adjustment. Thank you, Karen. I should have added that, but I missed one. Okay, so now let's talk about the QuickBooks Online features that are there that are not in desktop, which is particularly important for folks that are used to QuickBooks Desktop, something that has been there for a very long time. 20-something years of the software, and most users use QuickBooks Desktop, right? We have FIFO valuation. That's to me, it's a big deal. I love that feature. You have a box called SKU, which is a new box, something that QuickBooks Desktop doesn't have. Technically, you have manufacturer's part numbers in QuickBooks Desktop, but the SKUs can be searched within forms where manufacturer's part numbers can't. So they're more SKUs are more functional than manufacturer's part numbers, in my opinion. There's also a really neat reorder function that's sort of hidden in there. So we'll get into that if we have time for that. There's also this concept of categories, which is technically just an item, sub-item structure, the way that works with QuickBooks Desktop, but it has much better grouping and filtering than QuickBooks Desktop, especially when searching them inside forms. There's also a built-in preview of the price rules effect on the edit item screen, which I think is amazing. And if we have time, we'll cover that in part 1. If not, we'll leave it to part 2. There's quantity on hand tooltip and reorder point in Salesforce, something that QuickBooks Desktop requires you to have Premiere, and you have to click on a little button. With QuickBooks Online, this is actually a lot better. You can also use an account, an actual chart of accounts account in a purchase order without the need for an item. So this helps for the folks that don't want to use items, that want to use accounts, and they want to go straight to an account from a purchase order, something that you don't get in QuickBooks Desktop. And there's something really interesting. There's actually a date stamp on items based on when they were created, something that QuickBooks Desktop doesn't have. So sometimes it gives you some context to know when an actual item was created. So that's basically the contrast of the two, the sort of the pros and the cons of each one. Let me take a quick poll. Let's start with the polling question. I would like to first ask you if you are a QuickBooks Pro advisor. And while this poll is up, we'll leave it for about 2 minutes. Let me read some of the comments. There's already a few comments, and I'll try to answer some of them. So a few folks wishing Michelle Long a speedy recovery. Second that. Let's see, somebody says, how do I report my ACE credits? You have to go into that link, download the slides, and that will be in there. If you, for some reason, can't download the slides, and look in the chat, there's a link for that. If you can't, look up for the email that we send afterwards. We're going to include the slides in there. Let's see, we have a few people saying there's no value adjustment. There's a workaround for that, and I'll try to cover that if I have that. Somebody says, why is there no LIFO? FIFO is very limited. Yeah, that's a good point, but I would say for the most part, most people use either average cost or FIFO. Actually, I have very little amount of clients that use LIFO, but I do understand LIFO is a thing. Somebody says, let me see, does it do anything with them? Okay, somebody's commenting, what does it do? Okay, let me see. Can you use estimates in place of a sales order? You can, Alexandra. The problem is that you don't get a backlog report where you can see what type of data, what the availability of that item is. So you can do it, but not really. Somebody says Intuit should be doing a lot more inventory for QuickBooks Online. I second that. Julie is saying, can a SKU field be used in place of a custom field? The answer is yes, I agree. I agree that you can use a SKU for whatever you want. It doesn't have to be necessarily a SKU. You can use whatever you want. So I agree with that. Is there a good inventory software that works with QuickBooks Online? It is not part of the scope of work here, but SOS Inventory, Dear Inventory, and Locate are the three most popular inventory-related apps. Somebody says, I didn't get my CPA certificate. Yeah, you email me and request for that. Let's see. Okay, that's it. And I don't know. Yeah, that's it. I'll stop with that, with the questions. There's more that I couldn't answer, but let's get on with it. So polling question is closed. We had 96% of answers. I'll share it just so you can see it. 51% of you are advanced QuickBooks Pro advisors. 51% are advanced, and only 10% are not pro advisors at all. So this is definitely a pro advisor community that joins this webinar. So thank you very much. Okay, so we're back at the presentation here. So this is what I called the Inventory Product-Based Business Questionnaire. I've developed this in the past 7 to 8 years or so that I've been practicing heavily on inventory. And I've been trying to record what are those common questions that bring the best type of answers or the best conversations I can have with my client related to understanding their product-based business or the inventory workflow. So you click on that link that's there, or look in the handouts that the questionnaire is there. And let me give you an idea of the type of questions that I have here. So I recommend that you use this tool to ask the right questions that evoke the conversations around inventory that let you get deeper and deeper into understanding your client's business. Now, a lot of accounting professionals tell me I would not ask this question because this turns into a rabbit hole, or this becomes a rabbit hole. And I will tell you, I love rabbit holes. The money is in rabbit holes. The relationship building with your client, it's in the rabbit holes. And the advisory opportunities is in the rabbit holes. So until you have these conversations, questions that most accountants don't want to ask, like, let me just pick one at random. Do you use unique internally created part numbers, or do you use vendor manufacturer's part number and or both. You have a conversation about that. Why do you use a particular numbering sequence, and you understand the logic of the client. Why are they doing this? Are they getting an item list from a vendor? Is the item list good? Is it bad? They'll tell you things like, well, I prefer to have my own number, because if I give the client the actual manufacturer's part number, my client can Google it and bypass me. And that tells you a lot about your client, about their lack of confidence in the client relationships, on how they're selling their services. I mean, there's so many little nuances behind the answers to every one of these questions. So there's about 25 questions in this questionnaire. I really strongly recommend that you look into it and start having conversations with your inventory clients. And again, if you've never dealt with inventory and you walk into for the first time a client that has inventory, ask these questions and you will be astonished as of how much help clients need in the areas of inventory. So that's my suggestion, that you look into this questionnaire. This is 8 to 10 years worth of work I put into perfecting this questionnaire, and I am sure that that it will be valuable to you. Okay, so here's a list of all the topics I consider to be advanced, intermediate to advanced, and this is what I'm going to attempt to cover. Now, I know for a fact I can't cover all of these. That's why I call this part 1, and we will have a part 2 at some point, maybe in a few months. So this is what we're going to cover. So we're going to go in order and cover as much of this as possible. And then, when I have maybe 10 minutes left, we'll pick what the last topic should be. So if you look at the last 5 or 6 topics, just put in the comments from the bottom half which one would be the most important, because I suspect that we'll only be able to do about half. So let's start with importing items. So this is a very underused feature in QuickBooks Online, which is to take a spreadsheet and import it into QuickBooks. So there's a couple of nuances around importing them. A lot of people tend not to use inventory in QuickBooks because it's such a big inventory list, and they say, you know what, forget it, I don't even want to deal with it. So let's start with how that will work. So you click on the gear menu on the top right of the screen, okay? And we're gonna click on where it says import data. And then we're gonna click where it says products and services, okay? So we're gonna assume that you have a spreadsheet that looks like this. I also included the spreadsheets in the handout section, and there's also a link to the sample spreadsheet on the presentation itself. And this is really important because this is a template, and if you follow this template, your importing will work really, really, really well. So this is what the sheet looks like. I'm gonna add one more item here. I'm gonna call this glass fountain. Okay, let's say, for example, we have a product called glass fountain, and we'll call this, we'll put a description here, smoked glass fountain. We'll give this a SKU number. We'll call this an inventory part. Notice I'm literally just copy and pasting with what's there now. Let's say we sell this for $250. We make this taxable. We're gonna send it to the sales account. On the purchase description, I'm gonna copy and paste the sales description. And again, you may already have this coming in from a vendor or from another QuickBooks database or some other accounting database, right? I mean, that could work. So then we got $125 for the cost. The expense account, I'm gonna go ahead and copy, cost of goods sold. And let's say that on this import, I'm bringing a quantity on hand. So I'm gonna bring in 20, let's do 20. And let's say the reorder point is 20. We'll talk about reorder points in a second. And then we'll make this inventory asset, and then we'll make this 12/31, 2017. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and delete all the other ones that are there. And we're simply gonna, for the sake of the example, we're gonna import one item, this one called glass fountain, smoked glass fountain. There's a SKU, all the information there. And again, if you use the same template, you're gonna have a really positive experience bringing in the information. If you don't wanna bring quantity on hand, then you would just put 0 there, and you would put quantity as of date. I usually put the closing of the previous year is typically what I do, or maybe 1/1/2018 or something like that. But if so, this is up to you whether or not you want to bring in a starting balance. It's, the type of engagement tells that. For the most part, we don't bring starting balances, but if you do, it will do it. Now, how much you would bring the starting balance for? It would be a multiplication between quantity on hand and purchase cost, right? So let me just multiply them real quick so we know what that would be. So what's going to come in is $2,500 are going to come in into opening balance equity when I import this. Now, if you actually have a current cost that is different than your historical cost, pay attention to this. If you're importing items with a beginning balance, if your historical valuation cost that you're importing is different from your current purchase cost, make sure that when you import it, you bring the historical cost and then you change it after the fact, because that is going to use the purchase cost that's in this spreadsheet as your historical cost when you're importing a starting balance. So hopefully that is going to give you the answer. And then the quantity as of date, again, I'm putting the ending of the previous year, assuming that's what I'm doing. I'm bringing in an opening balance of inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, so I just save it as normal. It's just an Excel. Save it, go into QuickBooks here, click on Browse, open up my Excel, click Open. Then I'm going to click on Next in the bottom right. Then it's going to tell you, okay, so how are we going to match up all the fields? And because this is a template, everything should match up. The only one that didn't match was reorder point, but I'll just select it here. I don't know why that didn't match, but there it is. And you want to make sure that all your fields are mapped. Okay, so that's really what you're looking for, making sure all your fields are mapped. And that template that I was showing you is actually all tied to this. And when I click on Next, it's going to bring you a preview. It's going to give you 3 really important checkboxes that says, we sell this item, we buy this item, and we track inventory. So when you import it as an inventory part, automatically these 3 checks are there. There's a little check mark here that says overwrite all values. And that's only really when you're starting to when you bring in an update. So if I were to update my sales price or update my account or update my description, I would do it through here and then click where it says overwrite all values. But in this case, this is not an update. This is actually an import. Now, if any of the accounts don't match or any of the information, you're going to have a little red box here. Like, for example, the account is called cost of goods sold - cost of goods sold. For some reason, I didn't choose the right name. So I just hit the drop down and change that. And then you can obviously just fix that in your spreadsheet if you don't want that error coming in again. So that's all. That's a preview of exactly what's going on before you do the import. And then you click on import. And you can bring up to 1,000 at a time, I believe is the most I've been able to do. And then I'm going to click on the gearbox on the top right. And then I'm going to click on products and services. And then I should see my glass fountain. Yeah, there you go. There's my glass fountain item. When I click on edit, that will take me to the edit screen. There's all the information that I imported. Notice that there's a 20 start quantity on hand, which is what I imported. And then there's a little link here that says starting value. If I click on that link called starting value, it allows me to edit that initial entry. So I can edit the quantity on hand and the valuation. This is the only place inside QuickBooks that you can actually edit the valuation of an item per unit. You can always edit or adjust quantity on hand, but you cannot ever adjust valuation other than this specific screen. Only screen that allows you to adjust valuation, and actually have a workaround for valuation adjustment, but we'll get to that later. And normally here this goes straight to opening balance equity. You probably want to send this to retained earnings. But if you're an accounting professional, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, then get your accountant involved to understand what exactly is this, right? Because this is really, really crucial when you're bringing in opening balances, especially for the current period. So I'm going to move this to retained earnings and hit save and close. And that's the only edit I wanted to make on that. Okay, so we're done with importing items from Excel. Now let's move on to the proper inventory workflow. So the proper inventory workflow normally works like this. So we're going to do it in a specific sequence. We're going to start by creating an estimate. For the most part, people will start with an estimate. They'll select the customer. They'll select the product. We'll do the same glass fountain. They'll put the quantity. Let's say that's 2. They'll change the price. Let's say that's $2.75. And that's my estimate. Now, unfortunately, there's no report that tells me that 2 out of the 20 that I have in stock are reserved to a customer or anything like that. That's the function of a sales order. Unfortunately, we don't have such a thing in QuickBooks at the moment, the QuickBooks Online at the moment. So I'm going to date this February 24th and then click on save. Now, once the estimate is approved, or the client says, yeah, go ahead, let's go ahead and do this, you're either going to purchase the item if you don't have it in stock, and that's what this little checkbox here that says copy the purchase order is for, or you can draw from inventory. If you actually hover your mouse over the 2, you see right there over the 2, you see a tooltip that says quantity on hand 2, or reorder point 20, and it says low. That means it's very close to reorder point or at reorder point. So that tooltip is really, really awesome. It gives you an idea more or less where you stand. So let me go ahead and approve this estimate, and I'm going to hit save. Okay, there we go. And I'll close that. And then the next step would be normally to invoice it if I'm drawing from my stock. But let's say that for whatever reason, I'm not going to draw from my stock. I'm actually going to order this. So the next step would be creating a purchase order to order some more of the items. And I'll use, the way I'll do the example is I'm going to go back to the estimate, and I'm going to make this a bigger quantity. I'm going to make this 40. That way we know for a fact that we're short, right? That way we know for a fact that we have to order at least 20 more to get fully restocked. So I'm changing this to 40 just to do the example. And then I'm going to use the copy purchase order button here to create a purchase order just for this item. However, at this point, I'm going to decide that I want more than 40 because I want to have excess of inventory. I'm going to put there 65. So I'm ordering a lot more than what I was required to do. And then I'm going to pick the vendor or where I'm buying this from. So I'm ordering an additional 65 from the 20 that I have in stock. And once I receive it, I should have a total of 85. So let's say we put this order back in February 27th. And we click on save. So that's the next step. So we have the estimate, then we have the purchase order. Then at some point we need to receive the bill. We have to receive that bill. And let's say, for example, that they were only able to ship us 50 out of the 65. So we're going to do a partial receipt of that bill. So we're going to click on this button here that says copy to bill. Okay, and automatically a bill is going to be created with all the items. So all I have to do at this point is modify the quantity to the actual amount that I got. Okay, so I'm going to change this to 50. And normally I make sure that in the description somewhere, I put partial PO received. Okay, I also like to name the PO number. So I'm going to click on the purchase order link in there. And I'm actually going to command click with a Mac, so it opens up a new window because I don't want to close my bill window because I just want to capture the purchase order number. Where's my purchase order number? Did it go anywhere? Okay, there it is, 1003. So I actually like to copy that purchase order number and put it down here. Just trust me, it becomes easier when you record that purchase order number in the memo somewhere. So I'm putting there purchase order number 1003, although in the link section, I can click and I link to it, but I like to have it in there. And then the bill number would be whatever number you get from your vendor. So that's not something you copy or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save and close. And now I should have 70 in stock. So I'm going to click on the reports menu, and then I'm going to go down to my inventory report list. There you go. Sorry. Products and services list. So I click on products and services list. And then I will have a list of all my products and services and the quantity that I have on hand and the price. Okay, so it's very clear there what's my cost, my quantity on hand, and my price. And this cost, by the way, that you will see here, it's actually going to be average cost. So that's an interesting piece about this whole thing. This is what you're seeing here is average cost, is not FIFO. What you will see when the sale is made, you will see FIFO, but what you see here is average cost. So that's actually pretty interesting. And if you click on the gear menu on the top right, and I click on show more, I actually love this. This is called create date. This will tell you when the item was created. And that does provide some context. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and who knows. Okay, so that's the product and service list, which is basically what I have in stock. Unfortunately, I cannot backtrack that. So the QuickBooks Online doesn't have a historical quantity on hand value. It's only as of today. So that's one of the things I really dislike about it, but it's just one of the limitations that we have. If I click on the gear menu on the top, I can click on products and services, and I can go into this place, and I can also see my quantity on hand. I can see my reorder point. I can see my sales price. I can see my cost. Okay, so that was the proper workflow of creating a purchase order and receiving it. Now what I need to do is I need to actually sell it. So I'm going to click on the gear menu on the top, not the gear menu, the quick create button, and go to invoice. Let's say I'm ready to ship the product, and I'll select the customer that I'm shipping to or selling to. And then on the right, I'm going to have the drawer pop up and tell me, hey, by the way, you may have some open estimates in this case. I don't know why it's not showing. Let me see. Was it the right customer? No. Let me close out of this, and I'm actually going to go to the estimate itself. So I'm going to go into the estimate itself, and I'm going to click accepted by. Let's do HG, and let's accept this. I say we should be good to go with this one. And there may be one little setting that I have to click. This is a brand new file. You go to the gear menu, go to account and settings, and let me go to advanced, and let me go here where it says copy estimates to invoices. Really, really important. I hadn't checked it, so I can't go from estimate to invoice. Very, very important. So let me click on save. So I should have done that before, but doing it now, didn't realize it. So let's try that again. Let's go to invoice and select the customer, and now my estimate should pop up. There it is. Okay, so there's my estimate. So now I can pick that estimate, click on open. Okay, and that will bring over the estimate. Whoops, not open. That's not what I wanted to do. Try that again. Invoice, and do international customer. Not open. Sorry, I have to click on add. So I click on add. That will bring in that information. If I hover my mouse over the quantity, you see exactly how much I have in quantity on hand and how much I'm attempting to sell. So we're all good in that sense. And then I can click on save. And I have now sold the item. So now when I go back into my products and services list, I should have 30 in stock at the moment. Okay, so that's basically the whole purchase order workflow. One of the limitations that we still have is we can't do progress invoicing, so we can't partially invoice from an estimate, although it's on beta and it's going to be released not too long, not in a couple months probably, or maybe a couple weeks. But right now we have no way to track, hey, how much of that original shipment the client wanted we have actually fulfilled. So right now we're working in a very binary choice, estimate, invoice, which I dislike. I think I would have preferred to have a sales order. But I'll do one more thing real quick because it's just so quick, which is reorder points. I'm going to click on the edit button here for the item, and notice that the item has a reorder point of 20. Okay, let's say I were to make this a reorder point of 50. Okay, so I have 30 in stock, but the reorder point is 50. So what would happen is QuickBooks will actually tell me, it will mark it orange, letting me know, hey, you are low in stock. As a matter of fact, there's a big orange button on the top right where if I click on that, it filters only to the ones that are low stock. And low stock means it's under their reorder point. And then hidden in this edit button in the drop down, there's a little link that says reorder. It's hidden deep in there. A lot of folks don't know it's there. So I'm going to click on reorder, and that will basically open a purchase order and add the quantity, the item automatically in it. So I can then come in here, select my vendor. My item's already selected. Just put the quantity that I want to do. And you can see it right there by just with the tooltip. You see that the reorder point is 50 and the quantity on hand is 30. So you can choose whatever you want to order and click save and close. So that's a little tiny shortcut that sends me straight into the purchase order screen to reorder, to create the purchase order. And then obviously I have to receive the purchase order once the inventory comes in, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that's just a quick thing I wanted to cover. So let's talk about prepayments. And prepayments are so important in the world of inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and show you an item I already created. So for the sake of time, I already created an item called prepayment. So I created a non-inventory item called prepayment, and I'm sending the portion that says I sell this product or service to my customer. I'm sending it to an income account, to a liability account called customer deposit liability. So I created an other current liability account called customer deposit liability, and I'm tagging that as my income account. Then I came down here to, I put a check mark where it says I purchased this product or services, and the expense account, I send it to an asset account called prepaid vendor purchases. So this item has the sole purpose of tracking my prepayments on my purchases to vendors and my prepayments from my customers. This item will work for both. I also added in the description customer prepaid on, like just basically prompting me to put a date in there. And I added on the vendor description, vendor was prepaid on, and you're gonna see exactly how that works. Quantity is going to be 0. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit save and close. So that item needs to be created first. So let's start with how that will work. So let's say, for example, a customer is gonna pay me $10,000 ahead of time to sell them a product. Okay, so I'm gonna go into an invoice, and I'm gonna select the customer, and I'm gonna select prepayment. I'm gonna put here $10,000. Let me do, we'll do quantity of 1 and then 10,000. Okay, so this is a prepayment. Now, normally I would create an estimate before, which is totally possible. And then some folks want to go straight to invoice. Some want to do an estimate before, which I'm going to do both examples. But normally what you do is you do this, you do an invoice. I don't need to put a description here because the invoice itself will have a payment attached to it. For the folks that like to do an estimate first, which I'll do that, and that works. And actually, I prefer this choice. I go to estimate. I select my customer, and then it works a little bit different. On the estimate, I would actually pick the product that I'm selling them, okay? So let's say, for example, I'm gonna sell these people 100 of these items for $200 each, and I'm gonna go ahead and receive a prepayment on that day of the estimate. So I'm gonna type here prepayment, and then I'm gonna say on 03/01/2018, I received a prepayment. So I'm basically tagging it on the estimate. This becomes extremely useful in the future. Actually, let's bring this back to a couple of days. Bring it back to maybe the 20th, and I'll do that as well, just so we can have the dynamic of the dates, okay? And this is gonna be -1, and it'll be 10,000. So the reason for that is because when we create this estimate into an invoice, we really only wanna charge the difference, which is at 12,500. So I'm gonna go ahead and create the estimate. I'm gonna go ahead and approve it. And I'm gonna click save. So I got the estimate in there. Now I'm immediately gonna record the payment. So let's say I came in here and I received a $10,000 payment from my customer. So I'm gonna go into bank deposits, and this is back on the 20th from my customer Steve into my prepayment account. Actually, this would be a customer deposit. Into my customer deposit account, I get $10,000. Okay, I can put here, let me find out what that estimate number was real quick. Always put the estimate. So this was estimate 1003. So I'll put here, estimate 1003. That information is always important to have, right? Because sometimes we get messed up when our customers give us multiple prepayments. So I got a check for $10,000, and I already recorded it on the estimate to let me know exactly what's going on, and I'm sending it to the balance sheet. So accounting wise, I'm good to go. So I'm gonna click save and close. Let me do the same thing. Let's say another customer pays me. Let's do here bank deposits, and let's say a different customer pays me. Let me pick international customer. This one pays me $5,000 towards the sale, and that would be customer deposit liability. And let's say this was estimate 1004, and this was done on the 22nd, and I'll hit save and close and follow the whole example for the time being. Let me go ahead and do the estimate. So I'm doing this in reverse order, which is okay. And then on the 22nd, I'm going to select the other customer, the one that's paying me $10,000. Let's say for $5,000 they paid me. So let's say for this person, we sold them too many. There you go. So let's say this person, I'm selling them 50 of these items for, let's say, $175, and they're prepaying me the $5,000. So I'm going to come here to prepayment. Customer prepaid on 02 2018, and I'm going to put here -1 and $5,000. So it is a two-step process. I have to record it on the deposit side, also record it on the estimate side, and make sure that I record those prepayments in there. And I'll click on save. Now I'm going to do one example for a vendor. That way we don't go over time. So I'm going to do the same thing with a vendor. So let's say, for example, I'm going to write a check to a vendor here for $7,000. So I'll pick one of California, and I'm going to write a check to them using the prepayment account, and then I'm going to put here PO 1006. I don't know what the PO number is yet, but let's assume that's going to be the one. And I'm going to write them a check for $7,000. And then under customer job, I'm not going to put anything there, okay? Because I'm not tying it to a customer job. I'm just tying it to a PO on the description side. So I'm writing a check to a vendor on the 27th for $7,000. I'm going to hit save and close. And then I'll go ahead and create the PO now. So let me create a purchase order, which, by the way, I could also go back to the estimate and do it from that estimate. That's probably a good idea. But let me just go straight to a PO better. So I'm going to go straight to purchase order. I'm going to pick my California Supplier Corp. And let me delete this for a second. Okay, and let me pick the item that I'm going to buy from them, the glass fountain. And then let's say I'm buying from them 100 units at $160 a pop. That's $16,000. Then I come in here and I put prepayment. And I put the date of the prepayment. And let's say this purchase order was done on the 27th. That's fine. And that would be -1 for $7,000. So I have a balance of $9,000. And I'll click on save. And then I'm good to go there. So what does this whole thing look like in the balance sheet? So let me go to reports. Let me go to balance sheet, because I know if you're an accountant, you're a super nerd and you're waiting for this. That's good. So when I look at my prepaid vendor purchases, I can click on that 19,500, and I can click on group by vendor, and then click on run, and then I'll know exactly how much prepayments I have for each of my vendors, right? So it says one vendor, I paid them 12,500. That was something that I did before this webinar, and then this one for 7,000. Same thing happens when I go back to the balance sheet and I click on my customer deposit liability, and I go to group by and click by customer, click on run, and then I know exactly how much money I have from each one of my customers. Now going back to this example, we're going to keep this report open here. I'm going to use another tab. Let's say now it's time for me to now fulfill some of these sales. So let me go into this estimate. Let me go into the purchase order, and let me go ahead and receive this item. So I'm going to receive the purchase order, and I'm going to click on add. Let me delete this item here. Okay, this is not right. Hold on a second. Let me close this. Go back into my purchase order again. Sometimes these things go nuts. Okay, so there's my purchase order, which is supposed to be 16,000 minus 7,000. So I'm going to copy that into a bill. Okay, and then I'm supposed to add the negative. I don't know why that didn't come in, but that should have been there. And I'm going to put there -1 and then $7,000. And now I only owe them $9,000. Once this is created into a bill, this is going to go away on the prepayment side of the balance sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save and close. And the reason for that is because of this item here. So I'm going to click save and close. Go back into my report here for my vendors. Click on prepayment to vendors. Group this by vendor. And now we should see the $7,000 even out. So this will show you exactly how the balance sheet cleans itself up, and then you only really pay the balance to the vendor. So that's how you manage the vendor side. Same thing with the customer side. Let me pick an estimate here. There it is. Let me go ahead and create an invoice. So let's say it's time for me to sell this to my customer. Okay, so all the information is in here. The 50, the 5,000 that was prepaid. I will click on save and close. And now I'm going to go back into the liability, group this by customer. And now you're going to notice that that 5,000 washes out. So that's the whole process of dealing with prepayments. because that's how you manage the balance sheet side of the prepayments. And as long as you have that negative amount in each of the transactions to net it out, that's how it gives you the answer. Now, it doesn't matter if you use a negative quantity of one and then a positive dollar amount. You can use a positive quantity of one and a negative amount. It really doesn't matter. That's actually specifically a job preference. Okay, and now that could also be a non-inventory part, or it could be a service item. Either one works. It actually doesn't matter which one it is. Okay, so that's how you deal with the prepayment side. So we've covered so far. Let's just make sure that we mark these so I'll know for the next one. We covered these four, the first four, and then we're gonna cover, put that bold, and then we're gonna cover the workaround for adjusting the value on hand. That's fairly quick, but just want to make sure that we know exactly what we've covered. So this is what we covered so far, and we're going to go to adjusting quantity and value on hand for the last 10 minutes here that we have. Okay, so let's go back into our products and services list, or my products and services list, and let's say, for example, that the valuation on the 80 glass fountains I have in stock are 125, but I know for a fact that there is an error with that. Let's say that there really is only 78 in stock, so I have to do a quantity adjustment. But then moreover, my client's telling me that no, these are only worth $100 a pop. So how would that work? So first thing I have to do is adjust the quantity. That's the most important piece. So when I click on the drop-down menu here, and I'm going to click on adjust quantity. And that's actually fairly simple. You basically send this into my cost of goods sold account or my inventory shrinkage account or whatever you want to call it. And then I'm going to put a new quantity here, 78, and there will be a change in quantity of -2. I'm going to click on save. I won't click save and close. I'm going to click on save. And then I'm going to click on the more button, because this is extremely important here. I'm going to click on the more button. I'm going to click on transaction journal. This is probably one of the most important things that every single person needs to do after adjusting the inventory. You want to know what's the dollar amount effect that this transaction had on your books. If you don't go to this screen, you won't be able to know it until you browse it through the profit and loss. So unfortunately, something that I hate is that particular screen, let me go back to it. The quantity adjustment screen doesn't tell you anywhere what is the dollar effect of the transaction. So you have to actually click on that more transaction journal to get that piece of information. But going back to what we were talking about, which is, let's say that, we got the 78 right, but these are not supposed to be worth 125 a pop. These are supposed to be worth $100 a pop. So there is a workaround that I do in order to adjust the valuation on these items. And the way it works is we have to do two adjustments, okay? First, we have to adjust this down to 0. So because this is FIFO, this is how it needs to be done. So I'm going to adjust this down to 0. So I'm going to go to enter adjusting quantity. In this case, I'm going to bring this down to 0. Again, we're currently now adjusting the value. I use a different account called inventory value adjustment, and I specifically use that one so I know exactly what's going on. And then on the reference number, I'm going to call this VA1 or something like that. That way I just want to make it very clear that what I'm doing, it's a value adjustment, not really truly a quantity adjustment. Then I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then what I do afterwards is I create a bill. So I'm going to go to Quick Create and I click on Bill. And I actually have a vendor called Inventory Value Adjustments. I'm trying to sync everything up so everything works in my favor. Then I pick the item again, and then I'm going to bring this in for 78. But then I'm going to change the value, which is supposed to be $100 a pop, right? And then I'm going to go into account. I'm going to go to my same inventory value adjustment account, and I'm going to net this out down to 0 for 7,800. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a bill to enter and bring the inventory in, and I can put here in the bill number VA1 or whatever tag I want to use so I know it's a value adjustment, which is obvious because I'm using a value adjustment cost of goods sold account, and I'm also using a value adjustment vendor. So I'm covering all my bases in terms of letting me know exactly what's going on. And then when I click on save, and we're going to close that, we go back into our, let me just hit, go back to my reports. I'm going to go to reports, And then I'm going to click on product and service list. And let's see, why is that still saying 125? I shouldn't be doing that. You go back for a second. Let's go back and look at the history of what I did. I'm going to backtrack these things one day just to be safe. So I'm going to bring this down 1 day. And I'm going to bring down the other adjustment. Where am I? The bill. That would be for the first. That's good. I'll close that. And then my historical valuation, let me go to the profit and loss screen. Where is my profit and loss? That should now be showing. I'm going to do a dates all and click on run. Okay, so now what I'm supposed to be seeing is a inventory valuation adjustment of 2230, which is actually the net effect of the two things that I did. I just brought it back 1 day just in case it wasn't calculating properly. So when I brought in, so first we see the adjustment of the valuation coming, being adjusted because of the quantity adjustment, and then coming back in. And at the end, what you're going to see is the difference between the two, which is at 2230. And if I click on products and services here, it should group them by products and services, and you'll know exactly where it's happening. It'll isolate them. Unfortunately, on this one in particular, you won't see it just because the 7800 adjustment is not tied to an item, and you really won't be able to tie it to an item at this point. But you'll be able to see the history of what is being adjusted group by item, and you're going to have to tie it by that number that we're using, by tying that bill number with that quantity adjustment. So what we did was we had to bring down the quantity to zero, and use a bridge account, which is this one called inventory value adjustment, and then bring in a bill using the same bridge account to then make the adjustment again. Now there's one little issue here, which is the cost here is showing us 125. Now unfortunately, this is not showing the average cost, and this is actually not one of the options that it gives you to tell you what the average cost is. Unfortunately, that's just not what it's showing. This is showing what the index cost is on the item. So if I click on edit, it talks about this number here. So I would have to change that. It is also changing moving forward with my purchase orders. And that could be a different number. That could be 105. But the running valuation cost of that item has now been adjusted to, in FIFO, to $100 because that's the last bill I created. Now, let me run one more polling question, and right after this polling question, I'm gonna pull up one more report, just because that was a little bit rushed. I didn't know if we had enough time to cover all the bases there, but okay. Last polling question is up, so if you have to leave, you can leave. This is definitely not what I like to do. I don't like to do workarounds, but if I'm stuck with a client that wants to use QuickBooks Online for inventory and they insist that they want to use QuickBooks Online for inventory, fine. We're just working within our limitations, right? I can't force someone to move to desktop, and it's normally a really negative experience. Once people love QuickBooks Online, it's hard. But again, it's very, very limited, but this is something. But like somebody here is commenting is, look, if I teach that to my client, it's going to be a mess. Yeah, you're right. You're right. But that's why your client needs to work with QuickBooks Desktop, not QuickBooks Online when it comes to inventory. Somebody says, why use a bill instead of a check? The reason why I use a bill is because it forces me to use a vendor, and I prefer to have it all grouped with a vendor. Christina, that's the answer why I did that. Let's see. Let's do more inventory. Like there's a part 2 that needs to happen. Yeah, it's true. You're right. I mean, it's only 1 hour. So much that we can cover. Let's see. So this is the 4th polling question out of the 3, and you only need a 3. All right, so you only need 3 to get your certificate. Somebody says, what about negative inventory? There's nothing fancy with negative inventory. It could still happen just like with QuickBooks Desktop. Okay, so I'm going to leave the polling question up for another 20 seconds. Let's see. A lot of people are telling me that they don't like this workaround. I'm like, okay. What can you do? That's it. That's what I got. Okay, let's see. Somebody says, let me see. Why doesn't QBO have a value adjustment? I don't know, but I'm just showing you the workaround. Let's see. With a prepayment from an international currency, how would it work with foreign currency? Wow, that's probably an entire webinar that we have to dedicate to foreign currency. But that is a thing that does happen quite a bit. Foreign currency adjustments and losses due to that. Somebody says, how do I get rid of inventory shrinkage? There's an account called inventory shrinkage. You can just delete it if you don't want it, but that's automatically created, in QuickBooks. Okay, let me see. Okay, I think that's it for what I can answer at the moment from the comments. I'm still getting comments coming in. So let me close the polling question, and if you have to go, I get it. I'm gonna run one more thing because I'm actually a little bit anxious about the valuation report. So let me click on reports, and let's go to products and services list. Okay, and these are actually showing at the index cost, not the average cost. So am I missing something? Where is my average cost number? For some reason, I thought the average cost number was showing on the report, but it doesn't even show. This is actually not even the average cost. That's the cost that I manually put in there. So in order to get a valuation report, I may need to go to reports. I may need to go to balance sheet, and I may need to go to inventory asset, and then click on group by products and services and click on run. Okay, so this gives me a valuation by item, but that's a dollar amount. So there is a valuation report here. It's called, it's not on the list for some reason. I think it has to be searched. Like I'm trying to, oh, there it is. It's under sales and customers, and it's inventory valuation summary. This is really, really important. So this report, the inventory valuation summary, this actually has a historical date on it. So I'll take that back. I'm gonna take that back. Sorry about that. So you can actually go back and historically look at your valuation report. Now here it says the calculated average. That's what I was talking about earlier. That you're not going to get such thing as a FIFO cost, because that's not a thing on a balance sheet on a valuation. FIFO is something that only really gets enabled when you actually sell it. So this is the part I wanted to show you. So this is where you see the calculated average. So this is what I meant by, even though it's FIFO, valuation is still at average, and this is where the $100 go. If I had made that bill for a different dollar amount, so I'm going to go back into that same exact bill, and this is the bill that I used for reevaluate. If I had made this, let's say $117, I would just have to adjust this valuation here by that amount and make it negative 91.26. Yeah, so that will be 0. So I'm readjusting the valuation through this bill that I was talking about to 117. Hit save and close. And let me go back to the summary report, and now I should say it. So that's really what I was trying to show you earlier, which I basically skipped through, really because I was nervous because of the time. But this is the report that tells you exactly what the calculated running average is. It wasn't the product and services list. Can you mention some of the apps that I may want to take a look at? So Kate, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. So there's 3 apps I have most people use. For the record, I tend to drop the clients that go with apps just because it's not my area of expertise. So if it's an inventory, I personally, this is me, and I know nobody from Intuit is gonna like me saying this, but if a client has inventory, I only take them if they stay in desktop. I guide them. I say, sure, here's SOS inventory, have fun, or I refer them to someone that works with. I have someone in my office that works with SOS inventory. I don't, but my partner Alex does. So I don't do the SOS stuff. My partner does. So SOS inventory is the oldest one, the one that's been doing this the longest. They actually sponsored a QB Power Hour like 2 years ago. So I would recommend them. But the other one that's still hanging on by a thread is Dear Inventory. They're not as big, and they're there. It's called Dear Inventory. And one that my friend Kathy Kaufman recommended was Locate Inventory. She says she knows the people that are developing it. And apparently it's recently designed. It's got really high ratings. It works. It's got a lot of features. I haven't used it myself, but that's another one worth looking at. Let me see. Okay. Some people agreeing with me on the QBO for inventory sucks. Okay, can't change the start date for QBO, David. So I don't know. I was able to do it in mine, but you weren't. I'm not sure if it has something to do with the closing date or something like that. Let me see. A lot of issues with the starting value. Yep, that's true. What is the reason that QBO can be like desktop? I don't know, Mary. I don't. I just educate people on it. I'm not a developer. I have no clue. I ask myself the same question all the time. I feel that way about I feel the same way about inventory that you feel about inventory about QuickBooks Payroll. Linda, I agree with you. QuickBooks Payroll is another really weak area in QuickBooks Online. Somebody says, is vendor prepayment purchase the same thing as prepaid expense? Yes. Deborah Deffer, which I would definitely take this recommendation to heart, says SOS inventory is amazing. So thank you, Deborah, for that. Let me see. But be prepared to spend a lot of time learning the product. Absolutely right. I agree with that. Will you be discussing bundles in QBO in the future webinars? Yes, that's part of the stuff that I want to cover. Let me see. Have you ever used Inflow Inventory? No. Have you ever used the Buckstorm by Fishbowl? I guess it's some sort of QBO add-on for Fishbowl. No. Does Fishbowl work with QBO? I guess that's the Buckstorm thing. So I don't know. I've never ever used Fishbowl for QuickBooks Online before, only for desktop. That's it. All right, we'll wrap it up. So let me go back into the presentation. We'll wrap it up. And thank you very much. Let's see what else we have here. So to our sponsors, TSheets, we'd like to thank them. Number one rated app in apps.com. Create, manage, and approve timesheets from any device. TSheets.com. Arrow Workflow, only workflow manager for QuickBooks Pro Advisors, designed by QuickBooks Pro Advisors. And that's arrowworkflow.com. And HubDoc, the most popular document aggregator for QuickBooks Power users. Go to hubdoc.com and check them out. Next webinar will be, again, March 22nd. We'll talk about working with QuickBooks Desktop remotely for your inventory clients, of course, and using QBox. QBox is sponsoring the episode, and we're going to talk about how QBox works. We're going to do a full demo. And then it's not going to be exactly every other week, but it's going to be almost like that for the rest of the next couple of months. And that's it. Thank you very much for joining us. Join Michelle's LinkedIn group called Successful QuickBooks Consultants in LinkedIn. And most importantly, join our Facebook group, QB Power Hour, where I poll you guys, I ask you questions about, and a lot of this stuff that was put together for this episode came from your feedback. So check that out and then continue the conversation there. Otherwise, have a wonderful day and be safe this tax season.